Georgia's not great, are they? Sometimes they don't even look that good. But you know what? They're alive. And that's all that matters. That's all that matters. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We just witnessed an epic football game in Athens between the Hedges and Sanford Stadium as Georgia punched its ticket to the college football playoff. I guess if they keep repeating that enough times on the ESPN broadcast, then they're the ones that control it. So they're basically telling us we have determined that Georgia has made the college football playoff, regardless of whether they lose by 7 touchdowns against Texas next weekend. All right. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. The most important things I can tell you tonight, of course, involve the Amazon link. It's in the description section of all the videos. Please ensure that we will be here next week, next month, maybe even next year, maybe even in 10 years, maybe even when I start to finally grow some gray hairs, that we will be here because you have used the Amazon link. It's in the description section of all the videos, so please use the Amazon link. It is one way in which you can help us grow and build the channel without spending a penny. So basically, this is what happens. You use our Amazon link because you shop on Amazon and Christmas is coming. So you're going to hear me talk about this endlessly. Endlessly. You're going to hear me talk about this more than I talk about college football for the next month. So please use the Amazon link in the description section of all the videos right here at the Voice of College Football. When you use the Amazon link, it does not affect your shopping experience at all. And it's the one way you can contribute to the Voice of College Football network without spending a penny. All right. Appreciate you being here. Okay. We've got a great book here, Disputed National Champions. We will probably be writing more of these. If this gets well received, we think it's a damn good book. And please check it out. The offer is in the description section as well with the link, or you can just go to Amazon and look up Disputed National Champions. Maybe we'll have another one this year. No, we shouldn't have one this year, but of course we've got our first true, well, it's not even a true playoff. It's still an invitational, but it's the closest thing we've had to a true playoff. All right, final score from Athens tonight. Georgia, 1,000,000, and Georgia Tech, 2 less. What was the final score? 44-42, I believe. And I think Georgia Tech outplayed Georgia. My opinion, not by a whole lot. Certainly Georgia came back from 17-0 down, and boy, I got notes all over the place, and we'll probably produce an instant analysis video on this at some point through 8 overtimes. 8 overtimes. Good golly. And yeah, Georgia didn't look great, but man, they persevered, did they not? So that ensures, as they told us on ESPN tonight, that Georgia will be in the college football playoff. So that's amazing to know that when you're a broadcaster working for the company that shows the college football playoff, the irony in that. All right. And Georgia Tech, a heck of a football game, heck of a football team this year. They had already beat Miami and gave it another shot against Georgia tonight. We had Iowa with another walk-off. When Iowa plays Nebraska, put your money on the walk-off for the Hawkeyes, because that's what happens. I think that's 5 in the last 9 games. Iowa walks off against Nebraska. Ole Miss won the Egg Bowl. If you watched our post-game show of the Ole Miss win against Mississippi State, which was a really good football game. Mississippi State played well for a 2-10 football team. That's the first time I've seen the Dogs play this year, and I was very impressed by their wide receiver core and by Michael Van Buren against Ole Miss. They hung in there, and they had a shot to win with about 4 minutes left. They could have cut the game to a 1-score game, but they got stopped at the half-yard line. But that was a good ball game, and Ole Miss has a path. It could be a little convoluted, but they've got a path. We are going to, going forward, we are going to try to find some first-time callers. We would love to have a first-time caller here. Any first-time callers out there? Any. All right, we love our long-standing folks, but we're not going to grow unless we get some first-time callers on here. So whatever I'm going to have to do, maybe I'm going to do a marathon coming up here where I'm going to sit here until we get a first-time caller. Maybe that's what we're going to do. But we'll rip through the calls here. Here we go. DeReal MVP's on the line. DeReal, what's going on?
Hey, Mark. How you doing this evening?
I am doing just fine. What's up?
What a game. What a game, Mark. I guess Georgia's in, just in case you didn't hear for the 40,000th time they've explained that on ESPN.
Yeah, it's amazing how there's a committee that decides that, and we've got television announcers when there's no objective system. This is not the NFL telling us that a particular team has made the college football playoff when they still have one more game to play, and then there's a full slate of games tomorrow.
Correct. And we don't know what's going to happen in any of those games.
No.
Now, if they beat...
It's quite ironic that the television network that's connected to the contract with the SEC would tell us that Georgia has wrapped up the college football playoff bid.
Correct. But Mark, you know what? Everybody who says, oh, Georgia didn't look good, oh, Georgia only won by 2, Mark, that is old way age of thinking. If we were in the Stone Age, known as the 14th playoff or anything before that, I would buy into that thinking. But we're in this new age, new revolution of thinking where we're in a 12-team playoff. So you know what that means? It doesn't matter if Georgia wins every game by 1 point because they just win. So as long as Georgia won tonight, it didn't matter what they did.
Well, they haven't won every game by 1 point. They've lost 2 of them.
Right, but you get the excuse but you get the reason I'm going with here. We're in this new era where if you win every single game by 1 point, you will win the national championship. Whereas before that wasn't the case. As long as Georgia won this game or next week's game, they were in the college football playoff, in my opinion. So everybody who's saying Georgia is just down and out, the SEC's down and out, Mark, does Indiana, SMU want to see Georgia as their first round opponent, you think?
Well, I don't know if they want to see Georgia, but my goodness, I think those teams are better than Georgia Tech.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. With the way this season's been, I honestly don't know.
They are. Maybe not tonight's Georgia Tech team, the version we saw tonight, but I take Indiana over Georgia Tech. I don't think there's any question about that. Also SMU, they play in the same conference against the same competition, and they didn't lose to the teams that Georgia Tech lost to.
But if you had to pick who you want to play, would you rather play Arizona State, Boise State, or Indiana, or Georgia?
I would want to play in order: Boise State, then Arizona State, then Indiana, then Georgia.
That's exactly my point. So everybody acting like the SEC is just completely irrelevant. Georgia's just completely out of this thing. Listen, the bracket is largely going to determine who wins the national championship, in my opinion, this year. It's not who's the best team, because if you're the 5 seed, you're instantly favored to win the national championship. I don't care who it is. It could be Oregon, it could be Ohio State, it could be Georgia or Texas. If any of those 4 teams are the 5 seed, they're instantly favored because you can put it in pen to the semifinals. Because they're going to lose to Arizona State or Boise State? I mean, come on. And then, in this playoff bracket we got right now, Oregon would have to play Georgia in the second round. So, and whoever's the 5 seed would instantly be favored to win it all.
Yeah, and that's something that needs to be addressed going forward. And if we see it play out during this playoff, if we don't see it played out, then it's not going to be addressed. But if we do see it played out, then I think it should be addressed because, to be that 1 seed versus the 5 seed and have to face a high-level team in round 1 or round 2, your first game versus that 5 seeding that we've talked about many times during the offseason. So this has not come as a surprise to you or to me or to some others. Yeah, they need to address that.
Right. It could have gotten really bad with the 5. Oh, by the way, Josh Payne ran the numbers on FanDuel. Ohio State 21-point favorite against Arizona State, and they would be even a bigger favorite against Boise State. Mark, 21-point favorites. Oregon, I think they would be a half-point underdog against Oregon. I mean, Georgia would be a half-point favorite against Oregon in the second round if they played. That's not fair. I believe in fairness. I believe in having the most equitable system. How about having the team that's the 1 seed have the easiest path? Can we at least do that math going forward? Is this too hard?
It is too hard because, or it's beyond what I'm going to be able to calculate or format as a revised model right off the top of my head, because we have to honor conference championships and we have to honor winning games on the field. We can't just say the Vegas favorites are going to get the highest seeds and the Big 12 and the ACC winners are going to be down here, and that's how we're going to order it. I am not comfortable with that, nor do I think that that's
My
an
solution is
equitable.
just give them give them auto bid, but don't give them the seeding. So, for example, if Boise State was the 25th best seed, bump them up to the 12th seed, and then just have them be there. Don't have them all the way to the 4th seed. Does that? Hopefully, that makes sense. Why I explain.
Yeah. So wait a minute. You're going to reseed after every round?
No. So if you had a team that was super low, that is the 5th ranked conference, just bump them up to the 12th seed. And then if there was a team right above that, don't bump them up to the 4th seed, bump them up to the 11th seed. So don't have it the top 4 of the 4 conference championships. Just guarantee them a spot in there, but power rank the teams.
No.
Does that make
No. You're going to have a conference champion who's going to be a 12 seed and not get a bye and have to play on the road?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, not all conferences are created equally.
Well, of course they're not. They're not in the NFL either. But
they're much closer in the NFL than
I
they
know
are in
that they're
college
much
football.
closer in the NFL,
Closer.
but we cannot play a college football season and not honor the conference championships and have some committee. We have too much power in this committee as it is. They're going to take that power to an extreme if we allow them to do that. No,
I mean,
I get what you're doing, and I understand that it's not working, or we don't anticipate it to work this way because of this 5 seed position of favor, but I don't think that's the way to address it.
well, it's going to be, in my opinion, it's better than watching Ohio State beat the absolute soul and will out of Arizona State by 40 in the first round, and then beat the absolute soul and will out of Boise State in the second round, each and every single year. Because this is an entertainment product. At some point, that needs to be addressed. This isn't an objective formula scientific experiment. I mean, I wish an ideal world, but they're entertainment. Did you hear Kirby Smart, his in-game conference, what he said? The sideline reporting?
I heard all of those. Which one in particular? It seemed like they
the
pulled them off
viewership.
to the side about every 3 minutes.
Yeah, he mentioned the viewership. Why would he care about the viewership of the game? Why does that matter at all to him? I mean, if that doesn't tell you the direction of the sport, where head coaches after the games are like, oh my gosh, I hope we got great ratings. To me, that's pathetic. I'm sorry, but that's just pathetic. You just won a game, you just punched your ticket into the college football playoff, and your first thing you do is, oh my goodness, I hope people on Twitter and stuff like this. It's just so stupid and so superficial, Mark. Be happy you're in the playoffs. Be happy you can win the national championship. Don't be happy you may get 8 million viewers compared to 5 million.
Yeah, I don't know why he said that. It doesn't sound like something he would say, but he obviously said it. I did not see his post-game comments, except that he said Georgia Tech played great. Haynes King's awesome. We knew he was tough. They played awesome. They outplayed us, blah, 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 whatever else he said. I didn't see anything about the ratings.
I got you. Well, some other games that happened, because there were other football games today. I know Ole Miss, you talk about them having a narrow path. All they need is like 2 or 3 teams to lose. And they're in SMU, I feel like, is going to be out if they lose to Miami in the ACC title game. And then you just need Clemson to lose to South Carolina and Alabama to lose to Auburn, and that's it.
Did I say a narrow path? We did an Ole Miss show after the game, and I gave them a number of ways to make it.
Yeah, you said narrow path, which was confusing to me.
Well,
also, I'm not sure if you
for like 55 hours a week on here, so sometimes I don't select the exact words every time. So, there were all sorts of ways that I concocted for Ole Miss to make the field.
I got you. And Tulane also lost. I'm
not
sure that's big in the race, because now we can confirm a Big 12 team will make the playoff.
Yeah, and I know that probably hurts you.
I mean, it does. I would rather have a Big 12 team than Tulane. I mean,
Oh, okay.
Tulane beating up on Rice, North Texas, and all that.
I, I am not wishing anything ill on the Big 12, but that would have just been just interesting, and it would have caused controversy, and it would have just kind of backsided a lot of folks that would not have anticipated that possibly being a thing. I know that I've talked to several people here in the last couple of weeks that just either just had found that out or had me enlighten them to that being an actual thing that could be possible, that a Power Four champion could miss the playoff because they weren't one of the top 5 champions, and that was a very real thing. Bill Bender was on here from the Sporting News, and I brought that up, and he goes, yeah, I said they're going to play some two decent teams, that the committee may give them credit for a Memphis win and an Army win, and they're ranked ahead of every Big 12 team except for one who is only ranked 1 spot ahead of them. And we may have a Big 12 championship team that loses the last weekend of the season before winning the championship game. But again, we won't take off on that because that'll have to wait for another year because Tulane did lose.
Well, Mark, I know you're very interested in having the committee squirm. So here's a realistic scenario that gets the committee squirm. We've all just assumed Boise State's going to win the Mountain West, okay? UNLV loses this week. Colorado State's in the Mountain West title game. Colorado State upsets Boise State. Then who's in? Because Boise State's eliminated.
Well, they've got 2 losses. And
yeah, but they're not a conference champion.
Well, they're not a conference champion, so the best conference champion. So it's going to be Tulane if they win the American.
And then if Army wins, you can, in my opinion, you could still have an unranked team make the college football playoff. And we don't need a bunch of things to happen. We only need like 2 results for that to occur still. You just need Army to beat Tulane and then UNLV and Boise State to lose. And that's it.
Don't we just need Boise State to lose?
No, UNLV owns the tiebreaker over Colorado State, and UNLV plays tomorrow. So you need them to lose this week. That way Colorado State gets to the Mountain West title game.
Okay.
Yeah, and you need a thesaurus and a lawyer to understand these tiebreakers because they're all stupid. And
yeah, I've got a pretty good handle on all of them within the power conferences, but I've not looked into that Mountain West situation. But I would think that, if the American Conference champion gets in, that they're going to be unranked.
Yeah, which I know Mark is just somebody who likes to see the committee squirm and stuff. I would just wonder if they would put them in ranked just so that way they didn't have to put them in the unranked spot. But anyway, that's a small little thing. Mark, there's other games on tomorrow. How badly is Ohio State going to beat the absolute soul and will out of Michigan? Because I see no path for Michigan.
Yeah, if you want a final score, Ohio State's going to win 27-13.
Interesting. So to me, there's only 3 scenarios that can play out. Ohio State wins big, Ohio State wins small, or Michigan wins small. Is there any universe where Michigan wins big?
Of course there is, but does that matter? I think once Michigan scores 1 more point than Ohio State, then that is an accomplishment, and that is a complete disaster for Ohio State, and that's all that needs to happen. Whether Michigan beats Ohio State 28-27 or they win 52-0, I don't really glean anything different from those 2 results.
Well, you may not, but I think for the playoff seeding committee, it might.
Well, sure, they're going to view that much differently because the Buckeyes apparently have a bid nailed down as well. But if they would lose 52-0, now for me personally, I don't care really if Ohio State wins by 1 point or 50 points.
I got you.
Just want them to win the game. I will be happy. You will see a smile on my face if they win, and I will come on here if they win 3-2. I'll be fine with that. That'll be a win in the win column, and things will be right with the world, and that rivalry will be back to where it belongs.
Right. Well, over the last 25 years, it's the way it's belonged, but Michigan fans, you know what that comment will say. Back in the Stone Age, back in pre-World War II times and pre-World
Yes.
War times,
In
when
the
we
last
didn't have
50 years.
TVs, automobiles, and all that stuff.
Yes. Well, I pointed that out at the start of our Ohio State broadcast. Yes, this is simply I need to revise that tweet. It's the highest most impressions we ever received on a tweet. It was somewhere around 400,000 or 500,000, and I basically outlined the rivalry that if you are over 100 years old and you're a Michigan fan, you have bragging rights. If you're 4 years old or less, you're a Michigan fan, you have bragging rights. If you're between 4 and 100 and you're an Ohio State fan, you have bragging rights. So
that's a pretty good, accurate description of it. Mark,
yeah.
I saw that if Michigan kicks off as a 20 or more point underdog, this would only be the third national championship team in the following season to kick off as a 20-point underdog. Do you want to take a stab at the other two?
Okay, I will. LSU won in 2019. I'm trying to think if they would have had that kind of deficit in 2020. Was LSU that kind of an underdog against Alabama the next year?
They were.
2020? Okay.
Yes.
They lost that game 55-17, I believe.
Seems pretty accurate for them to be that large underdogs then.
Okay. And so how many more?
One
other game. How far? I don't know how far back point spreads were.
With 2010 onward.
2010. Oh, this is only the last 15 years. I would say who were iffy national championship type teams. I would say wait a minute, that Notre Dame team, and well, they didn't win. The Cam Newton 2010 team, the next season in 2011, they went 8-5. Let me think. Hang on. Georgia, Michigan. Okay. Those were really good teams. Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, through Florida State. Yes, I'm going to say the 2010 Auburn team.
That is correct.
Against
also Alabama.
Yeah.
So that just tells you how far Michigan has fallen from last year to this year, because everybody going into those seasons knew those teams would take significant step backs. So, very disappointing season for Michigan this year. Very disappointing.
Yes.
Mark, also another team that's had a disappointing season is Wisconsin this year. They're 5-7. 22 straight years they made a bowl game. Are not going to make a bowl game this year. Luke Fickell is their, I thought he would have come in immediately, be success. He made it, proved it in Cincinnati. There's just been no progress over the last 2 years.
They're worse.
Right. What do we do?
Well, you give them one more year for sure. I don't know. They fired their offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, with 2 games left to play. So he's been the scapegoat. They need to find a quarterback. Braden Locke is not a good quarterback. He throws a nice ball about 1 out of every 15 attempts. Like today, I'm watching the game against Minnesota. I watched every play of the game, and every so often he'd throw a beautiful pass. But unfortunately, he's playing for a Big Ten team at a high level, so that just doesn't. You need to do that like every 4 out of 5 throws, not 1 out of 5. He's just not a good quarterback. I don't know how this season would have played out with Tyler Van Dyke at the controls, because on occasion, Wisconsin looked fairly capable against the likes of USC. That game comes to mind, but they just lost to Nebraska last week by 19 points, and they were completely inept today. They were blown off the field, completely outclassed by a decent marginal Minnesota team. So that program, yeah, I have a ton of respect for Luke Fickell. I have less respect for him as a football coach than I did a few years ago when he was hired. I thought that they would represent themselves very well. I know they had a difficult schedule, but they did not play well this year. This team doesn't do anything well. they were always a defensive-minded team that had a top 5 to 10 front seven in the country. They're bad there as well. They're not good at anything. They are really not good. Do they have singular players that are really good? NFL, of course they do. They don't do anything well. They have a lot to work on there. They're not a good football team.
Yeah, this is one of the more quiet stories in college football that I think is going to percolate throughout the offseason and next year. To me, one of the more shocking seasons and disappointing seasons I've seen in a while. Now, Mark, there's a lot of people who were coping about the Georgia Tech game, saying it was quote unquote rigged or the officials played a major role in Georgia Tech losing this game. What do you have to say about these narratives?
Well, I watched the game start to finish and took copious notes. And anytime you start to get into pass interference calls, there's a bit of controversy there because it's like calling fouls in basketball. It's very subjective. However, it was called equally on both sides. As soon as I would see a call go against Georgia Tech in terms of pass interference, I would see the same thing on the other side. So I didn't see anything egregious in that game by any stretch that was favoring one team or the other. That's what I have to say.
That's what I largely say. To me, the most egregious call I saw was with 27 seconds left, I believe, or maybe just a bit less, when the final drive in the fourth quarter for Georgia Tech. First down, they throw a mesh route, and it looked like to me Georgia could have ripped the ball out and recovered the fumble. They didn't even review it. I don't know how you don't review it because they just called it incomplete catch and moved it to the next down. On replay, when it looked like he took the ball and made at least a football move.
Yeah, they didn't look at that. That doesn't make any sense. I thought that they should have reviewed that as well.
Did you think it was a fumble? Because I thought there was a legitimate case that could have been a fumble.
Well, I just noticed that, so I'm watching two football games at the same time. I just noticed that, the back comes across the middle. They toss him the football. The defender immediately just does a beeline, breaks it up. And, my immediate reaction was that's questionable. They'll look at that, but they didn't. Now, I didn't dissect the replay, and we've got to be careful with replay. It makes everything somewhat distorted in terms of possession time because you're watching it frame by frame.
I understand that, Mark, but the tuck aspect of it really got, when I see somebody tuck in the football, to me that there is some level of control there to make a football move.
Yeah, it's difficult to catch a football and tuck, and it's difficult not to catch a football and tuck it away. Those two things cannot coincide. We have made way too much. We have diagnosed this whole process of catching a football just incredibly difficult when it's not. If you and I went outside and started throwing the football back and forth, I think we would understand when somebody caught a football and when somebody dropped a football.
Correct. And to me that was a catch. Now, I'm not going to be like a Big Ten fan and just make excuse because that one call didn't determine the outcome of the game. But I thought it was the most questionable call, and which is why I'm confused with all these non-SEC fans and people who just hate the SEC and want to see our downfall claim it's rigged and Georgia, the SEC officials are bailing out Georgia and all this stuff.
Is that what Big Ten fans do? Make excuses?
Oh, particularly Ohio State fans.
Ohio State fans make excuses more than anyone else?
Yeah, I've heard about Marvin Harrison's head injury for 3 years.
I've not seen the studies on that. You'll have to send me the metrics on that Ohio State fans make more excuses than any other fan base.
Well, it's mainly anecdotal because they're also one of the largest fan bases. So I don't know if we did a per capita rate.
Okay. All right. So I know I saw something that was pathetic out of the Big 12 conference today on Twitter that I responded to in the hope that I get some kind of notice from the Big 12 that they actually recognized me calling them out. They were complaining and whining and complaining about that the SEC says it just means more. And then they were randomly showing the score of old bowl games. This is the actual official account of the Big 12 showing the score of random outdated bowl games from 5 and 6 years ago where the Big 12 won games against the SEC. I had no idea what they were driving at.
Well, it's a relevant conference trying to hang on to their last bit of relevancy, Mark. They're just at the edge of the cliff, and they're just fighting ferociously just to be hanging on to the edge of the cliff. That's all they're doing.
And then some other clown fan chimed in with, yeah, see? And then I did a quick glance at their standings, and it added up 4 wins and 11 losses against the ACC, the Big Ten, and the SEC this year.
Well, facts are a stubborn thing, Mark. Everybody has their own narrative to feel. And, everybody hates everybody else, and everybody's rigged against everybody else at all times. It doesn't make sense, but that's how it is.
And I appreciate everyone that watched the video that I produced where I broke down the common opponents for Ohio State and Michigan, which there were only 4. There are usually more than that when they played in the same division, but there were only 4 this year. And I had so many people tell me, this is useless information. You never know what's going to happen. They're rivals, blah, blah, gave me the standard, throw out the records, they're rivals. This information's useless because you can't tell anything from it. My comeback was basically, I'm not saying that these comparisons are ironclad and can't be discussed and debated. Of course, there are certain factors involved with these games that you can't just say, well, just because they beat them by 10 and they beat them by 3, well, they're better. That's why there's a compilation of games. But I guarantee to anybody who watched those videos and complained about that, I guarantee that the team, anytime you take 2 teams late in the season in a big game that have played a list of common opponents, that the team that performed better against those common opponents wins that game 80% of the time. I guarantee it.
Well, that only makes sense because that team has proven all season they're the better team.
Yeah.
That's almost like the whole point we play the sport is to figure out who's better than somebody else.
So I got a history lesson from one Michigan fan that back in 1969, Michigan was a 17-point underdog and they beat Ohio State. Ohio State was supposed to be so much better and they beat all these other teams. And I said, sir, you went back 55 years to prove your point. You're basically proving my point by pointing out the exception. Oh, my word.
Well, some people never learn, Mark. Everybody's just stuck in their way, and they're in their silo, and if you challenge their narrative at all, then you're attacking them fundamentally as a person. Now, you could just be attacking their ideas, but they have converged their ideas to who they are and their identity, which to me is kind of sad and pathetic to do, because people are a lot more than just their silos, and they can easily walk and escape their silo. There's a whole beautiful world out there, but it's really sad to see. Anyway, Mark, that's all I got for you. I'm looking forward to 4, 5, or maybe even 6 SEC teams making the college football playoff.
All right, DeReal. Did he say 6? Did he possibly say 6? I can see a path for 5. 4 from the Big Ten, ACC 1, Big 12 1. Where am I? Group of 5 1. That leaves 5 left if Notre Dame loses to USC. Although Notre Dame being elevated to number 5, even if they lose to USC, that's a debate. 10-2 Notre Dame lost to a 7-5 USC team. But that could open things up for 5 from the SEC. 5 from the SEC. How about that? All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Rob's here.
Hey, Mark. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great. So the funny thing about this game, Georgia Tech outplayed Georgia in literally every way except for the fact that they had one more try on fourth down efficiency. So they were 1 of 3. Georgia was 1 of 2, and they had 2 more penalties than Georgia. Other than that, they beat time of possession. They literally every other stat they were like ahead of Georgia. In some ways, it wasn't even close. Rushing, Georgia Tech had 260 rushing yards to Georgia's 108. Georgia was only able to manufacture 108 rushing yards against Georgia Tech. And I would say, I don't want to say Georgia Tech's like a middling ACC team. I think at their ceiling, and you know, from previous calls, I'm kind of a ceiling guy. I think Georgia Tech's ceiling is you know, puts them into the upper. They start to get to the upper area of the ACC, but this was not like a great ACC team, and this was what many people, I would say, looked at as the best SEC team left. And this, I get it, it's a rivalry game, but it was also at Athens, it was at Georgia, and they just gave up 200 yards rushing and 20 points to UMass last week. So my question is, what is going on? You know what? If this is the best the SEC has to offer this year, and look, I'm not saying the SEC is not a good conference. Obviously, they are, but this is not a good look. And I keep wanting to defend the SEC, and I keep saying, like, week after week, I'm like, well, they're still the best conference, but I'm starting to lose faith in that, because we just keep seeing these performances by these supposedly top SEC teams, and they just keep like falling on their own sword.
Okay, so there are a lot of things there that you said that are completely on point, that there are no great teams in the SEC. As of now, if we see an SEC team run 3 to 4 consecutive wins in the playoff, then we may change our minds about 6 to 7 weeks from now. But as it stands right now, no, there are no great teams in the SEC. There may not be any great teams in college football. And I have little doubt that it's the best conference, but is it the best conference at the top? I think the conference with the two best teams at the top is the Big Ten. But I do think that the SEC is the best 5, the best 7, the best 8, the best 16. And I don't think it's that debatable. Now, the things you bring up about Georgia are things that we have seen over and over and over and over. So this is not a Georgia team that's rolled through the season, then suddenly ran into a rivalry game of a team that just had a great matchup and was hot that night. Georgia looked lousy against Florida, against Kentucky, against Alabama for a half, and probably another game that I'm not thinking of. Ole Miss steamrolled them pretty well. So, yeah, this is not a vintage Georgia team. I think we give them a little pass, a little leeway because of what they've accomplished and who their coach is. And we tend to see guys in uniforms that we have seen those uniforms win championships. And therefore, we think these guys are the same guys. And we know what the recruiting rankings tell us. But this Georgia team has not played extremely well at all against aside from a spectacular second half against Alabama. And they played Tennessee really well, smacked them around, and really controlled that game. They haven't played like a top 5 team in the country. They played more like a top 15 or 20 team in the country.
Yeah, I think if I'm a Georgia fan, my biggest concern is the fact that I just gave up 413 yards, not to Georgia Tech, but to Haynes King himself. One player, 413 yards. I mean, they can't, like, I'm worried, man. If I'm a Georgia fan, like, you give up 260 yards rushing and you only got 100. Like, that was they got out physicaled, completely out physicaled, and it's a miracle they won.
What was
and
the
honestly,
yards per carry average?
What's that?
What was the yards per carry average? ESPN does not have its box score up yet. All
right, so it wasn't bad for Georgia. They were averaging, well, I don't know about their yards per carry. Their yards per play was 5.9, but Georgia Tech's was 6.7.
Well, the point I'm making is I understand that Georgia Tech ran for a lot more yards, but they also, I'm sure, threw the ball a lot less. I know that they at one point the time of possession was 3-1.
Yeah, it was brutal. Yeah, they
ran more plays, and therefore, again, I don't have it here, but Yeah, what's wrong with ESPN? They've got nothing. They've got no box score, no recap, no play-by-play. It all says
Mhm.
nothing available. Anyway, so yeah, Georgia, I am guessing is going to be formidable in the playoff, but they're just, I don't know that they're the best team in the SEC. I don't think there is a best team. I guess technically there has to be a best team in the SEC, but there's no way for us to evaluate who that would be. If somebody came to me and said Georgia's the best team in the SEC, I would say maybe. And if they said Ole Miss was the best team, I'd say maybe. And if they said Texas was the best team, I'd say maybe. And even if they said Tennessee's the best team, I'd say maybe. And then after that, I would debate that Alabama or somebody else was not the best team in the SEC. But I don't think there is a best team in the SEC. I think there are 4 teams.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you what, the teams that are playing like the best team in the SEC right now aren't even in the playoff picture. Well, some people are trying to say South Carolina could get in there. That would be a narrow path, but I mean, South Carolina and Florida are playing some of the best ball in the SEC right now, and those guys aren't even. I mean, Florida can't get in. South Carolina needs a lot of help to get in, like a lot of help. But those are the 2 teams playing the best football in the SEC right now, in my opinion. And you know, I mean, A&M has a chance. I think home field advantage is a real thing. I think they have a chance to beat Texas, and I'm not super impressed with Texas as it is. They've had one of the easiest schedules in the SEC. They did. Their win over Oklahoma looks a little bit better now, but not that much. I mean, Alabama just doesn't look like a very good team this year. I think the problem with Alabama is they're one of the widest potential floor to ceiling teams there is. Like, their floor is lower than it's been in a long time. Their ceiling's high, but the problem is if you get a competent defense out there that can dictate the rate of play or the style of play and stops Milrow and focuses on a run, Alabama's squashed. Like, they can't do anything. So I don't know. My opinion of Georgia just took a massive hit tonight watching that game. And look, I'm not trying to diminish anything Georgia Tech did. I think they played a great game. Haynes King and the coaching staff, everybody played great for Georgia Tech. It was a fun game to watch, but man, Georgia did not look good. And Ole Miss, Ole Miss played a team that hasn't won a conference game, and they were in trouble for a long time in that game. They did pull away at the end, but a couple of close games there for 2 of the top contenders in the SEC.
So Georgia came into this game, number 9 in the country? 8?
I think they're 7.
7?
Yeah,
so
7.
So they're fine for right now. And according to ESPN, they're fine even if they lose to Texas by 50 points. So they're fine.
Right.
Now, Alabama and Ole Miss, they're interesting to me in that they dropped to 13 and 14. And of course, Ole Miss won unimpressively and really had no opportunity to win impressively because they played a horrible team. But like you just said, that game, Mississippi State had the ball at the half-yard line with 4 minutes left to cut that game to 26-21 and made some mistakes and couldn't get the ball in the end zone. But that was a really good game. I enjoyed that game, and it was a close game. It was
good. Yep.
So Ole Miss wins against the 2-10 team by not much. So they actually, to me, even though their record's better today than it was yesterday at 9-3, their resume is worse. The way I evaluate teams, their resume is worse today than it was yesterday because they beat a 2-win team in a close game. But they're sitting at number 14. Alabama's at number 13. What's interesting is South Carolina is sitting at 15. South Carolina is playing a 9-2 Clemson team that's number 12. So if South Carolina, let's say they go out and handle business.
I think they will, yeah.
They really take it to Clemson. Not 50-0, but they win the game like 24-10. They win by a couple of scores. What do you do with South Carolina? They lost to the 2 teams in front of them and have the same record. If Alabama beats Auburn, all 3 are going to be 9-3. And in my book, even though South Carolina may be playing better right now, you have to honor the head-to-head wins.
Right. Yeah.
So they're stuck.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think South Carolina has a great shot at the playoffs. Like I said, they need a lot of help.
But some
Like,
people would argue otherwise. And I
yeah,
get that argument, but I can't set up two teams from the same conference that played very similar schedules and one beat the other with the same record and send the other team to the playoff.
right. Well, that's the thing, right? If all things are equal, then I think you kind of have to honor the head-to-head. That's one thing that was really frustrating about the committee a week or two ago when they had BYU behind SMU,
Yes.
even though BMU or BYU beat SMU head-to-head, and pretty much everything else about their records at that point in time was fairly similar. So
Yeah.
that was kind of a goofy thing.
I don't condone that, but at the same time, they play in different conferences and the rest of their schedules are different, as opposed to Ole Miss, Alabama, and South Carolina with a lot of overlapping games.
Yeah.
Like all three teams played LSU, for example.
Right. I want to comment real quick on this comment. Ralph Wolf says it's a rivalry game. It's always going to be like that, even if one team is 2-10 and the other team is 10-2. No, that's not true.
Exactly. That's why I posted that.
Yeah,
Ralph, we love you.
Yeah,
Ralph, you're great. You're here all the time. But listen to this, Ralph. Okay, I would love for the next time somebody says this, I want them to actually run the metrics on this. When somebody says, "Oh, throughout the records, rivalry games are always close." No, they're not always close. And nobody can prove until they actually do the math that they're closer than any other game. Georgia beat Georgia Tech by 8 last year. They beat them by 23 the year before. They beat them by 45 the year before. They beat them by 45 the year before that. They beat them by 24 the year before that. They beat them by 31 the year before that. They beat them. Okay, so we go back to Kirby Smart's first season. They lost to Georgia Tech. So we just ripped off the last 7 games, and one was close, and the rest of them were 31, 45, 45, 38, whatever they were. So that shows us that just because teams are rivals doesn't mean they always play close games.
Right, exactly. And the thing is, Georgia, they're it's clear that they're having a down year, but they were still pretty favored in this. And Georgia Tech was a 7-4 team at the time. I'd have to look again,
Yes.
but they were losing games in the quote unquote weaker ACC to ACC opponents. And Notre Dame's not technically an ACC opponent, but whatever. But they were largely losing games to what a lot of SEC people would say was a weaker schedule, and then they just come into Athens and out physical Georgia. I mean, that's not something you can just say, oh, it's a rivalry game. No, they're lucky to get the win. I mean, that was a good game. It was fun to watch. But yeah, I mean, hey, you know what? I know you got a lot of other calls going on, so I'm going to hop off here. But always good talking to you, Mark.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's keep it moving. We've got our buddy Will stopping by. Everyone, reminder, hit the like button. I never tell you to do that, but please hit the like button. I notice we don't have high numbers of likes, and that's probably because I don't tell you to hit the like button. So please do that. I'm asking, not telling. And please subscribe here at the Voice of College Football as well.
All right,
Hey, Will.
Mark. Did you think that the Haynes King fumble looked like targeting? A lot of people
targeting.
think that was targeting on him.
I did not even think
I'm
about
just saying
targeting.
the Big Ten people.
Did somebody say anything about targeting during the broadcast? I didn't notice anyone say anything about it. I didn't cross my mind.
Mm-hmm. People because I mean I know the targeting rules vague, but it's by the letter of the law, people said that was targeting.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and watch it.
And it looked like a holding on the touchdown, but I mean Georgia Tech also the time management at the end was bad by them, but people were saying that it was rigged because of the no pass interference. I mean not pass interference, holding on the touchdown.
Yeah, I heard Jesse Palmer and Joe Tessitore make a comment a few times after they played 3 or 4 overtimes that, okay, they're running out of plays, and I get that they're at the 2-yard line in regards to plays that are designed with a condensed field. But Jesse Palmer made, which I think Jesse Palmer's great. Normally, I think he's really good at what he does, but made some kind of comment that, I think Georgia ran Carson back because they ran out of pass plays. And I thought, I would be passing the ball almost every play because I would get my quarterback out on the perimeter where he would have the option to run or pass. I think that's the most dangerous play at the 2-yard line, is to take a quarterback who can run and get him on the perimeter.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know why Georgia Tech didn't stick with what they were with what worked for them earlier. Like on defense, they were just going prevent, and it's just frustrating when I see teams do that. But anyway, Georgia won.
Well, they lost a lot of guys in the secondary, for one thing. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. We got this guy, Will ND.
Yeah, I was frustrated at the time. I've cooled off from them, but yeah, I don't know if they did pay. It was ACC refs, so I don't know if they got any extra from the refs, but I don't know. Georgia looks like, I mean, it looks like my Irish could beat Georgia, but if Georgia plays like they did against Texas and the second half against Alabama, it would be tough. But that offense didn't look very impressive to me. But they got it done.
They did get it done. Yeah, I think that they are nowhere close to what they've been. But I would not be surprised if we are watching a Georgia national championship team in 6 weeks either. I'm not expecting that, but it would not surprise me.
Mark, are you more confident about this one than you were the 96 game? I mean, I think Ohio State will win for sure, but
no, because I've lived a lot more life than I had in 1996. But I was already scarred in 1996 from other losses. So they had several trips in the red zone in 1996 in the first half and came away with either no points or field goals. And I had a bad feeling about that.
It just like from that, it seemed like the quarterback play just wasn't enough. That was really the one piece from those teams. I mean, I don't know. I was watching them as close as you did, but
yeah. Well, in 1995, they had Bobby Hoying play quarterback, and he was an NFL quarterback. I think he was as good as. Definitely not the guy playing for Tennessee at the time, but anybody else around at that point. Of course, Tommy Frazier was a much different type of quarterback. Danny Werfel, Bobby Hoying as NFL players, both pretty marginal, pretty bad. Joe Germain, though, once they got him going,
he was good, right?
He was good. He was an upgrade, even though he was not the pro that Bobby Hoying was. Bobby Hoying actually was the backup quarterback who played in the 2000 AFC Championship game for the Raiders.
Good for him.
They only scored 3 points, but yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I can't pull it.
Notre Dame's playing a night game, right?
No, 3:30.
3:30. Okay.
Which I think I don't know if that helps or hurts. I mean, I'm always like I'm nervous just because like it's a big game, but I feel like they should win. Hopefully by a margin, but we'll see. Just if the offense stalls out, then it'll get stressful. But if they can pound it, the rock, and get the passing game going and score, not let USC get hope. No, that's a script. I still think the SEC is the deepest, but I definitely not the best at the top at all.
Well, I hope not. I would like to see another conference win a national championship. We did last year. At least that's currently what the official status is of the national championship. We'll see if that holds. But yeah, it's the best conference. It just is the best conference. But yeah, it doesn't matter if you have the 10th. If your 10th best team in the country is better than everyone else, that doesn't matter. It just matters who's got the best team if you're talking about national championship. So, yeah, the Big Ten might turn out. I would be shocked if anyone from the ACC or the Big 12 even played in a national championship game.
I would be shocked as well. And to the USC fan that said they will stack the box, I do think the Notre Dame passing game has improved as the years gone on, but he definitely wasn't helped by the fact that Georgia would get beat by. I mean, I could see Georgia. I mean, if Georgia plays like that, I think they'll lose to all those teams as well. But if they can turn up like they did against Texas, who knows?
So a statement like that for me, when he says Georgia would get beat by, okay, that's your opinion. That's based on watching football. Okay. I don't think you can say Georgia would get beat by those teams. They could get beat by those teams.
I mean, we saw the Tennessee game happen though before.
Yeah, they already played Tennessee, and that game, it wasn't a blowout, but Georgia was clearly the better team. Clearly the better team on that night.
I mean, it just depends which Georgia team shows up. I mean, if Notre Dame and Penn State are at their best, I think it would definitely Georgia would maybe win those games 50% of the time. Georgia did beat Tennessee though.
If Georgia played Notre Dame, Tennessee, and Penn State, I would put money on Georgia winning more of those games, winning a 2 out of 3.
Oh, that's fair.
But maybe they wouldn't. I just think that for anyone to make blanket statements about most of these teams is really tough to do. I think we could make a long list of teams. And like Ohio State and Oregon they're more consistently good. So I think that they have been better, but would anyone be surprised if Notre Dame, Tennessee, Penn State, fill in the blank, Georgia, Ole Miss beat Oregon or Ohio State? No, I think those teams are better than the other group of teams, but we've got about 12 or 14 teams in the country that can win against each other. Like consistently win, not like Arizona State could beat Ohio State 1 out of 40 times. Like, I mean, consistently, they could if they just played all the time, if you put Tennessee, Georgia, Notre Dame, Penn State, keep going in some kind of tournament where they just, like, we played the season and all those teams just played each other all the time, every week. Like, we'd see, unless there were like really bad rash of injuries or bad bounces for somebody, we'd probably see them all go anywhere from 5-7 to 7-5. That's my viewpoint.
That could be the new college football at some point, Mark.
That could be the new college football. And for those people that want that type of college football, and I've had people on here that are like, yeah, I've got no time for Wake Forest and no time for Texas Tech. Well, if it really gets grinded down to like 32 schools, then somebody's got to go 2-10, 3-9. that aren't used to going 2-10 and 3-9 now. So, hey, if you're Minnesota and you really want to be part of the in crowd among 32 schools, then get used to going 3-9.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, Michigan probably would have went 3-9 this year, but next year they could be with Underwood. Who knows? They would be maybe 9-3 in that.
And the national champion, just like an NFL team, could be 8-4. 8-4, they go to the playoff. They're a hot team. They get a good path to the championship. All right, Will, anything else?
No, just vented a bit about that game, and hopefully tomorrow there'll be some drama, not involving my team, but just some good close games, rivalry games. Even the ones that aren't for the playoffs, just watching the rivalries, part of what makes college football great. So
Absolutely, we had some good ones today.
Mm-hmm.
Really, we had the entire day in terms of rivalries. I don't know what the Big 12 is doing with rivalries. I think they're zigging while everyone else is zagging. So they've played all their rivalries and they just kind of give up on the last weekend. We saw the great Colorado-Oklahoma State rivalry game.
Not competitive. Who knows? Mike Gundy, get back to work.
0-9. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, Will.
Appreciate it, Mark.
Have a good night.
Great night.
You too. All right. We will keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We've got John on the line. John, what's going on?
How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I just wanted to touch up quickly on a couple things that Darrell said. He said that if SMU loses in the conference championship game, they're out. Now, I believe that if SMU, they got one loss? SMU's got one loss,
yes.
Right? Okay, so if they lose in the conference championship game, where Jesse Palmer made it a point over and over and over again to point out that the committee's not going to punish Georgia for making the conference title game and losing. So I just wanted to know your opinion on it. Well, if that's how some people feel, that if SMU loses that game, that they're out, do you think the same should go for Georgia?
So we're assuming all these games are competitive, right?
Right.
Okay. All close games. Okay. So you're making too much sense. You're thinking of this too logically, because you're right that if Georgia, having possibly lost this game against Georgia Tech tonight, they went to 8 overtimes. So they basically tied the game. They basically, in a sense, didn't win the game or lose the game. If you just look at what happened in regulation, they tied the game. So give them credit for the win. Of course, they outlasted Georgia Tech, but it took 8 overtimes. That they go to the SEC championship game and they lose by a touchdown to Texas. Okay, they're automatically in, and they are a 10 and. Had they lost tonight, they would have been a 10-3 football team, and SMU is going to be an 11-2 football team at number 9. I think SMU is so much on the fence at number 9 that I'd have to know what else is going on in the country to know whether they would fall that far. I think that Miami should be safe at number 6 if they lose to SMU. That they wouldn't fall from 6 all the way outside the playoff. But at number 9, I don't think they should. I agree with you that they shouldn't. Because there just aren't teams behind them that have good enough resumes to do it.
Yeah.
Right behind them, you've got, I think Indiana's right behind them.
Yeah, I think Indiana's 10.
Yeah, Indiana's 10. So what's Indiana going to prove by beating Purdue by 25 points?
Right.
Okay, they're going to be one of the worst teams in the country. And if SMU, I believe in winning games and rewarding wins, but I also believe in, if Miami's truly the 6th best team in the country, that's what the committee's telling us. and SMU plays them down to the wire, well, then they just played with the 6th best team in the country. So they've got to be the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th best team in the country, right? So
Right.
they shouldn't hurt
I
their
don't think
resume
I
by
don't think
doing
Miami
that.
played like the 6th best team in the country.
Well, at this point, I don't know who's played like the 6th best team in the country, because it seems like when people knock my rankings, I let them know, okay, who are you moving up? Because it just, after a 5 or 6 spots, it just seems to descend into this mess of
Yeah.
8-3, 8-3 all over the place, or 9-2 with not good schedules.
And then
So I agree with you.
you brought up how, the ESPN broadcast just automatically says Georgia's in, but don't you think that there should be a little bit of talk about Georgia being out with a loss?
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely, there should
and
be.
another point I wanted to make about DeReal's take on the SMU thing is, so you're going to bump SMU out for teams like who? Alabama? Like the people talking about Alabama I don't think Alabama should even have a chance to get into the playoff. I don't. I know they beat Georgia, but I just.
And what backs up your point is that Alabama's at 13, Ole Miss is at 14, and number one, the teams that they play this weekend shouldn't boost their resume.
No.
Mississippi State's horrible. Ole Miss barely beat them. Didn't, it was a good game. It was down to the last 4 minutes in the game. Alabama is going to play Auburn. And sure, if they clock them by 5 touchdowns, I'll give them some level of credit for that, because Auburn just played its best game of the season last weekend. But the rest of the season, Auburn's been horrible. So Alabama should not get any great boost from beating a team that's going to finish 5-7. So the committee, to me, boxed itself in a little bit, which I was a bit surprised that they dropped Alabama and Ole Miss below Clemson, because if Clemson beats South Carolina, there is no way that you can logically lift Alabama and Ole Miss past Clemson, because if Clemson's already in front of them and then they win a quality game against South Carolina, they have to stay in front of Alabama and Ole Miss.
Right. And at some point, can we just, I know there's people talking about how if Notre Dame happens to lose this week, that's going to benefit, Alabama. I think it benefits Clemson more than Alabama and Ole Miss. If you watch Notre Dame, I know they haven't had the greatest schedule, but they do look like a pretty good team.
Sure.
I wasn't a huge Riley Leonard fan at the beginning of the year. I thought he looked like a deer in headlights at the beginning of the year, especially in that Northern Illinois game. But he seems to have been coming on pretty good these last couple weeks. Granted, it was against the opponents, but you got to play who's in front of you, right?
Notre Dame beat the team that we saw tonight play Georgia. They beat them by 18 points.
Yeah. So I just think that. Go ahead.
And just to finish my thought on Clemson, the committee putting Clemson where they have above Ole Miss and Alabama with a much better opponent this weekend, so they've got to stay in front of them. Well, then you would keep, by all logic, Clemson in the playoff 10-2 if they beat South Carolina Saturday. And to your earlier point, then SMU in the same league playing many of the same opponents, and not even just the same exact opponents, but the same quality of opponents, even if SMU played a Duke while Clemson was playing a Louisville kind of thing, they're still playing a very like schedule. Well, SMU just went 11-2 versus Clemson's 10-2 and played the conference champion to the last possession of the game. You can't, by that logic, drop SMU out of the playoff.
No. He's stuck in this thing where it's like it's SEC or nothing, and I think it's one of his where I normally love listening to DeReal because I kind of make fun of his SEC glazing. I guess that's what I should call it. But the you heard it right. He said 6 SEC teams. So that comment
that's what he would like to see. And
yeah.
We don't need to get too uptight because Dareal
Oh
is not
no,
going to
no,
make the selections.
yeah, no, I love DeReal. I love listening to his takes. It's he provides a lot of material for the chat, running them comment numbers up for you. And then he brought up the one thing I don't really like is how people bring up, like he's bringing up, oh, well, Ohio State would be this big of a favorite versus Arizona State, this big of a favorite versus Boise State when it came to his argument
Yeah.
about the playoff seeding.
I hate
Well,
that.
well, how big of a favorite was Alabama against Vanderbilt?
Sure.
You know, obviously the line, that's what Vegas thinks is going to happen,
Yes.
but you don't know what's going to happen.
The
Like,
thing
who's
about
seen Arizona State running through the 3 teams they ran through the last 3
Yep.
weeks?
Yeah,
Or Florida running through the last 2 teams that they ran through?
that's right.
You can't predict that. And I don't like the thought of, and I agree with you, I don't like the thought of not giving a conference champion a bye and not even giving them a home game.
Yeah, we might as well just tear up the whole structure of the sport and throw teams in different leagues to try to even it out if we're not going to honor the conference championships. And one thing about the Vegas lines that I'll say, and I'm very respectful of the Vegas lines, but they're off plenty of times. The thing about the Vegas lines is that they either nail it, they're very on top of, I don't want to say most games, but a large portion of the games. But when they miss it, we probably all missed it too. Like
Yeah.
when they miss, it's like it's not like, oh, they're idiots, they missed it. Oh, none of us saw it coming. Like the Vandy Alabama game. I think Alabama was a 23-point favorite in that game. Yeah, I was surprised when Nick Saban said a couple years ago to try to uh, politic for his team to make the playoff. Well, if the Vegas line says that we would be a favorite against TCU and against the other teams in the playoff. I was shocked. Like I was just envisioning for a guy who used to go to the Alabama news conferences when Gene Stallings was the head coach, standing up, or the other coaches that I covered, standing up and saying, Coach, the Vegas line this week says so and so, and just being berated. Like, I can't imagine a reporter stating that to Nick Saban, where he actually would have taken that as a valid reason to choose particular teams to be in the playoffs, that the Vegas line said that these are the best teams.
Right. And I wanted to bring up the one thing that kind of annoyed me about the end of the game. But I know, I know you said you didn't really notice it, but the fumble on Haynes King,
Yeah.
The Georgia defender did hit him with the crown of the helmet in the side of his face.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I'm with you. The pass interference calls were kind of both ways. Both teams kind of benefited from those. It wasn't one side or the other. The one thing I didn't really understand was you gave Kirby Smart a sideline warning. And what was it, the last 2 Georgia Tech possessions, you can see him standing on the field when Georgia Tech's snapping that ball. Like, no, I mean, I understand it's not that big of a difference because it's 2 point, it's going to be half the distance to the goal. It doesn't matter. But that was kind of weird to me. I wanted to ask you someone. I think it was DeReal that brought up Wisconsin. I'm sorry, I know I'm bouncing around, but there was a couple topics I wanted to talk about. Is Jim Leonard still there at
No.
Wisconsin? No. Did he get fired?
No,
Or did he
he
just leave?
left.
Okay.
He wanted the head coaching spot.
Okay.
He was the interim head coach when Paul Chryst got fired. He finished out the 2022 season. And then the last I heard from him, he was some type of an special assistant for the Green Bay Packers, I believe.
Okay. Well, in my opinion, I thought he at least deserved at least a chance at that head coaching job.
Well, he got it for about 8 games.
Yeah. I mean, Wisconsin's defense did play their best when he was there.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
And the thing is with Wisconsin is they in my eyes, when they were good, they had a great running game, and it's just kind of these last, let's say, 4 or 5 years, they just can't seem to find it anymore. They just can't seem to find that ground and pound game. Just two more things I wanted to bring up. Well, one was a prediction. I do think Ohio State wins 33-10. I heard your prediction earlier. And what was the other thing that I wanted to bring up? I'm sorry, I can't remember what the other Oh, the Big Ten fans complaining comment that DeReal made. Come on. Come on. Everyone complains. It doesn't matter what conference your team plays for. Everybody complains. That's part of being a fan. I haven't met a fan that doesn't complain about something. Yes, it's a well-known fact that the Big Ten fans and the SEC fans, I guess they're rivals. They hardly ever play each other, but you would never know that with how much trash talk that the two fan bases of those conferences talk to each other. But I think when it comes to the playoff format, I do think I never really understood. I do think the NFL does it the best way. I know it's not the NFL. I do think the whole reseeding the thing after the wild card week, I do think that's the best way to do it. Keep, the conference winners to bye weeks, but maybe kind of reseed that. But then again, that also takes kind of the drama out of it. Like, who's going to be the 5 seed? You got to have some kind of drama for that first round. You know what I mean? Like, I like the drama of knowing, hey, if Ohio State loses the Big Ten championship, how far do they drop? Do they stay in the 5 seed? Do they fall down? Because they're not going to fall below Penn State, in my opinion, even though they got 2 losses. But that goes back to the can't punish the team for, as Jesse Palmer states it, can't punish the team for playing an extra game. So, but and then one more thing I wanted to ask you. If you had an upset pick for tomorrow, who would it be?
If I had an upset pick, I'm trying to think if I do have an upset pick. I should go look at my picks, which, by the way, folks, we're 5-0 against the spread today. Okay. You can get those on Patreon. All right. So
Georgia cost me my parlay.
let's see. I took Oregon State plus the 18.5, Mississippi State plus the 26.5, Iowa minus the 2.5, Georgia Tech plus the 19.5, Minnesota, which was basically a pick 'em. Okay.
Great call in that Georgia Tech game.
If you consider, I didn't pick them to win outright. I thought about it.
Yeah, on the spread.
So the only game, well, I picked 2 upsets tomorrow. So the most confident I would be, if you consider this an upset, according to the Vegas line, would be South Carolina plus 3. I'm picking South Carolina to beat Clemson.
Okay. How, on a percentage bit wise, how much of a chance do you give Syracuse?
Oh,
because that's my upset pick.
35%.
You think that's still an upset, even though it's in Syracuse?
Yes, they're a 11-point underdog.
Oh, I didn't know it was 11 points.
Yep.
I mean, I guess I just, as a Buckeyes fan, it's easy for me to say this. I guess it just depends on what Kyle McCord you get.
Yeah, if Kyle McCord's hot and those receivers, then Miami is playing one of the worst teams that they could be playing in this game, because their secondary's weak and Kyle McCord can sling it. Now, he could throw 4 picks and Miami could win 45-10, but he's also capable of single-handedly, with those receivers, keeping Syracuse in the game and pulling off an upset. I definitely think that's on the radar.
He could also throw 4 picks and 4 touchdowns.
Well, sure. Yeah.
It's been kind of fun watching him play though this year. I didn't normally watch Syracuse games, but I'm not one of those big Kyle McCord haters because I
Oh, I'm not
I got,
either. I've got nothing
yeah,
against Kyle McCord, and
I got quite a few
put a
Ohio State
lot.
fans.
They've put a lot on him this year.
Yes,
He's throwing the ball 45 and 50 times every game.
yeah, and but I mean, I was a little puzzled why he of all teams to transfer to, it was Syracuse. I thought maybe he would get a little bit better of an offer of a team to go to, but I mean, I guess not. Well, he's from that area, isn't he?
He's from Philadelphia.
Oh, he's from Philly? Oh, okay. I thought he was from New York for some reason.
So, yeah, he's leading the nation in passing yards and I think attempts. Yes, attempts, completions,
Wow, it's not even
yards.
close.
Yeah,
What is that,
he's
52?
thrown 52 more passes.
That's a whole game.
That's a healthy game.
Oh,
That's
my.
crazy. Yeah. With a bowl game, he's going to throw 600 passes this year.
Oh, I see Hennigan's name on there. What'd you think of their win?
Well, I didn't see any of it, but I didn't necessarily expect it, but that's a great win.
Yeah, Tulane came out really flat. I mean, I wasn't expecting it, if I'm being honest. But all right, Mark. Well, thank you for taking
Well, I
my
appreciate the
call.
call. Thanks, John. Have a good weekend.
Go Buckeyes.
All right. Now we're going to start ripping through these babies. Here we go. Michael, what's going on tonight? Hello, Michael. Are you with me? Michael. I think Michael's fallen asleep. Okay. Call me tomorrow. Minnesota Dave.
Hey, how's it going, Mark?
You've got the axe in your hands.
Hey, Mark, there is nothing like hearing on Wisconsin after Gopher victories. I absolutely enjoy it. We played absolutely great.
Yeah.
And I've been trolling Badger channels all day. And I'll say this.
Yeah.
Locked on Wisconsin, they're the worst. They kept on like blocking and taking away my comments. So I was just trolling them.
Were you just having fun?
Yeah, it wasn't like anything mean. I wasn't it wasn't
I
like,
don't know
oh
what's
yeah,
wrong
we
with these
beat you
people.
guys today, and they're taking it off. The Axe's coming back to Minnesota, where back home where it belongs. They're taking it off. Because the guy basically writes on his board like, no politics and no Gopher fans. I'm like, screw you. take your abuse today. Take your abuse. You've been abusing us you abused us for 14 years one time. Take yours. You can dish it out, but you can't take it. Come on. That's what I love about Corey, because at least he'll pick up when I'm trolling him.
I hear you.
That was just a fun game. I was at a bar with a bunch of friends, got to catch up with some people I haven't seen in probably months. You know how it is. Everyone has kids, everyone has, stuff to do. So sat down, had a couple wings, and just drink beer and watch the Gophers just annihilate Wisconsin. And let me tell you something, man, that I have never seen Camp Randall so empty in my life. From the beginning of a game to an end of the game.
I noticed that too.
Yeah, there was not that many fans there. It really felt that this was like the 80s and 70s Badgers all over again. I have never seen that. And
it's got to be sweet to own this series, because obviously you didn't forever.
We tied it today.
You're talking about the all-time series.
All-time series.
You're talking like a Michigan fan, Dave. You're talking about what happened in 1900. That's fine. Yeah, I saw that it got tied up 63 all. But I mean, would they win like 15 straight, 14 straight?
14 straight.
Okay.
So yeah, they broke that in like when PJ's second year in 2018, and then I noticed this too. PJ has won 4 games against the Badgers. 3 of them have been in Camp Randall. He's 500 against the Badgers, and 3 of his games are wins in Camp Randall. Out of those 4,
Okay.
That's kind of interesting to me, since it's like you think it would be the other way around. And also, we got to start winning some home games against the Badgers. I want to do jump around again at the end of the game, like we did last year, or not last year, but 2001. So, man, I watched this Georgia Tech game, and I was like, God, if they pull off this upset, there might be only one SEC school going in. I was really, this was a really interesting game. God, and then there was a lot of good games today. A lot of comebacks. I saw that Colorado State came back against Utah State. That was interesting. And then I saw that there was a dogfight with Stanford and San Jose State. That was a good game. And then you had, of course, you had Nebraska doing Nebraska things today against Iowa, just choking it at the end. But it was a fun day. But I'm happy about my Gophers, man. I mean, everybody played great. Max, he didn't create any turnovers, and he threw for 2 touchdowns, and we were just a perfectly balanced offense the whole entire game. Tyler had a great running game. We had a big run with the other guy from Oklahoma when we faked the tush push and had him go around. That was a great call. PJ just outcoached Fickle. And let me tell you something, that's every Wisconsin fan and every one of these channels was fire Fickle now. I'm like, it's a little too early to do that right now. Give them one more year. If they don't make it to a bowl game next year, then yeah, I can definitely see that. But I kind of, then I can say I told you so after next year if they end up not going to a bowl game and saying that Fickle might not be the right guy for Wisconsin. I don't even know who is the right person for Wisconsin now. I just hope there's no one right for Wisconsin. They keep on choking.
Yeah, I think Luke Fickell's a good coach, and I would expect that he's going to win there to some degree at some point, but it's off to a much rockier start than I anticipated. I expected more out of him, especially since they were better before he got there.
Yeah. I said to you, Mark. I thought when they fired Paul Chryst, I thought that was probably firing like Bo Pelini, and then it's starting to look that way.
Yeah, if you just look at records, there was nothing that Paul Chryst did that was fireable. His last full season, the guy went 9-4. So, and then he got off to a 3-2 start. I just think that they saw the opportunity to hire somebody that they thought was better. They saw the 4 new entries into the league, and they were concerned about competing. And I've heard a lot of bad things about their recruiting trajectory too. So,
yeah. That's true. Well, you have other calls and you want to get going here, so I'll let you go, Mark. Talk to you later. Go Gophers, Sky Yuma, and F the Badgers.
Thanks, Dave. All right, rapid fire. Here we go. We got Michigan Man.
What's good, man? I think it's official, Mark. I think it's official. This is the biggest down year in college football. I think it's official after tonight, man. Just put a stamp on it. What do you think?
Down year. What's that mean?
Down year in terms of the number of teams that I would consider dominant slash elite.
How long have you been watching college football?
I would well, I'm 28, so but I would say the last time I would say 2007 might be the closest to this. Probably
Yeah.
2007.
Yeah. 2007. Sure.
I don't know if I said this last time, but I think I would say the last 10 national champions would be favored over every team this year. I feel pretty confident saying that. Going all the way back to probably, I would say going all the way back to those probably 2014, 2015, I would say.
Well, as of right now, we still have a team that's undefeated. And we have another team that's only lost one game, and that's to the undefeated team by 1 point, et cetera, et cetera. You already know who I'm talking about. So before I'm going to completely agree, like, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. This is the way it does look, because once we get down to like number 5, number 6 in the country, those teams don't look that great. And certainly Ohio State and Oregon have had off weeks. But I do think we could be sitting here in 6 or 7 weeks and we could see a team that proved to separate themselves in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there theoretically could be a team that, just runs through the playoffs and blows everybody out. I'm just saying, obviously, up to this point, I mean, even Oregon had 3 games this year against teams that aren't good and struggled mightily and needed, late scores to win. I'm talking, of course, of Oregon, Boise State. Was it Boise State? Who was the other team they played in the beginning of the season?
Idaho.
Idaho and Wisconsin. I
Yeah.
think last year's. I would even make this argument. I know it's a different year. I think last year's Oregon team was better than this year's.
Yeah,
That's subjective. But this Oregon the Georgia Tech game, man. Wow, did Georgia Tech blow that, man? They were clear. I thought they were clearly the better team
yeah, I
in
did too.
regulation.
Yep.
It's just a classic, something. It always seems to happen, right, in these games with lesser opponents where they seem to be. I think they could win. They always make one mistake, or even 2 mistakes, and then they end up losing the game. It seems to happen way more often than it doesn't. And I think that was if you go back and watch that fumble, I think it was targeting according to the rule book. He led with the crown of his helmet.
Mm.
All that. So it is what it is, man. I think Georgia. I don't have faith in Georgia beating anybody. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't have faith in Georgia against Ohio State, Oregon. Who else would? That's probably it because everybody else isn't that good. What were your thoughts on? Do you think Georgia can still beat pretty much anybody, or are you questioning that now?
Well, I don't think it's likely that they beat just about everyone, because we're seeing a trend where this team put it together for one game against Texas, and the rest.
I would argue they didn't. That second half didn't Texas come back in that second half?
Yeah, it was never really that in doubt, but yeah, they came back. But still, to go on the road and beat Texas by 2 scores, by 15 points, that's a pretty impressive win. But other than that, I don't know that they've really played. The Tennessee game, they really played well that night too. So they can elevate when you can beat Tennessee and Texas in fairly dominant fashion. That's pretty strong, but you can't put away Kentucky. You can't put away Florida. You lose to Alabama. You get trounced by Ole Miss. They scored a short field off an interception touchdown on the first drive of the game and then couldn't score a touchdown the rest of the game against Ole Miss. So they've played a very mediocre season. And then we saw what we saw tonight against a team that's 7-5.
You know what the biggest trend is with them, and this is probably the most shocking part because they've recruited well in these positions, is the line of scrimmage. They're not great in the line of scrimmage this year, and that in all these games we're talking about, that's where they're getting whooped at, is on the defensive line and the offensive line, and that's surprising considering the talent that they have.
You are right.
And you excited for your get back tomorrow, Mark?
Am I excited about it? I am rarely, I would not consider what my approach is to these Ohio State Michigan games as being excited. It's important. It's the most important game of the season. So that's what it is. My nervous level is like 1/10 of a percent, not even that, 1/100th of a percent of what it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It just doesn't register as much, but we'll see once we get close to kickoff and I turn the game on and the juices start to flow.
Yeah, here's what I'm about to say, man, and this is not a reverse jinx, so I don't want you to think that, okay? I think Ohio State's going to win. I'm going to go 33-15.
33-15. Okay.
I think they're going to two scenarios here. If they keep it close.
Yeah,
go ahead, my bad. I was just going to say they keep it close in the first half, kind of like what Ohio State's been doing in some of these games. They've been, it's been close in the first half. I think if they keep it close in the first half, that's going to be the score, 33-15. I think they're just going to pull away in the second half. I think there's another scenario where they just blow the doors off Michigan. I think if they get up a couple scores in the first half, I think it could get ugly. That's just my opinion. Because I don't think, obviously, because Colson Loveland sounds like, did you hear that? Colson Loveland sounds like he's not going to play.
Yeah, that's not good.
That's their only receiver. That's their only passing threat. They don't. Outside of that, they don't got nothing. So if they get, go ahead.
They were trying to find Tyler Morris and Frederick Moore, trying to get them touches last week.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust that against a secondary like Ohio State, though.
Yeah, I would like to see Colston Loveland play. I would like to see Will Johnson play. I want to see Michigan at full force, but it doesn't appear to be that. But I would like to see the Buckeyes at full force for the playoffs, but they're missing their two best offensive linemen. So
I don't think anyone's going to be full force for these playoffs, though.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's such a long season now.
Yeah.
Everybody seems to have. What is there any team? Would you say that who's the most healthy team right now? You think?
That's a great question. That is a great question. That's a great topic for a video.
You should do a video where you rank teams by health going into playoffs.
That would be a great video right there because that's going to be substantial, having to go through 3 to 4 games.
Yeah, because I don't know who it would be. Is Georgia pretty healthy? I don't know. I haven't kept up with Georgia as much.
Yeah, I don't want to say that they're not. I'm trying to think. Trevor Etienne didn't play tonight.
By the way, that is a crazy take. DeReal saying 6 SEC teams. I don't even.
I'm surprised he doesn't say 13. So, yeah.
He's gonna have. I think he's gonna realize this. Probably over the next couple of seasons, that the SEC is not gonna have that. I personally, I think it's gone. That stranglehold that they've had. I think he's gonna have to come to grip. I think that's what's gonna happen, and we're gonna because the disparity of talent now. Nick Saban's no longer there, so you no longer have that. The Death Star of college football is no longer there. Teams clearly, because of how the transfer portal is and that it's much more even. So I think he's going to have to come to grips, Mark, with the fact that the SEC is no longer going to be this juggernaut that's so much better than, let's say, the Big Ten. Do you agree with that future assessment?
I do, because we are paying players above the table now. And so the Big Ten is loaded with money. And
I would argue they got more money.
what's that?
I would argue the Big Ten got more money.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The Big Ten's loaded with money. And you're bringing in 4 schools from the West Coast that I think, even though Texas and Oklahoma I would take as a 2 versus any of those 4, it is 4 additional schools. So, yeah, the players are still in the South, though. They're still in the Southeast, and players still tend to stay geographically close to home.
Yeah, but when you got Larry Ellison, Mark, okay, you know what I'm saying, and we could throw bags around now. I don't think it matters as much, man. But all right, man, I'll let you go, man. I'll call in tomorrow. See, because I'm already in the mind state of this is kind of a throwaway year. It's not, the disappointment ain't really gonna be there as much. Of course, I hate to lose to you guys, but it's just not. It's not the same, you know.
I hear you.
It just don't feel. I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna be like, well, I don't even remember the last time we could be in that position. But I understand because you guys have been great for ever now, right? I mean, when's the last time? What's that crazy stat, Mark? Isn't there a stat with Ohio State where they haven't lost less than or they haven't been below? There's like a crazy stat, like they haven't been below 500 or something. They have the most consecutive winning Oh, that's what I think it is. The most consecutive winning seasons, or something like that.
Yeah, it's been a long time since, but yeah, I can't really compare what I used to view this game as when I was a kid and when I was a young adult, because it's just viewed so much differently. But when Ohio State had bad teams, this game still meant the world to me, and it was still the most important thing in the world. So nobody could tell me that, well, Ohio State, like they were in 1988, they're 4-5-1. This doesn't really matter. No, it still was the most important game to me. More important than any game anywhere.
Yeah, it's important, but it just, I don't know. I think it's a mind state thing, right? When one team is so superior and they're just expected to win.
No, that's the point I'm making. That didn't matter. Michigan was headed to a Rose Bowl in 1988, and Ohio State was a huge underdog in that game. I still wanted to win, expected to win. That still meant everything to me. I was still crushed when Michigan won the game.
Oh, you had that what's it called? That young person. You weren't as rational when it came to the game.
No,
it's kind of what you say. Okay, I was like that. When the Brady Hoke years were obviously in the Richard was so bad. But when the Harbaugh was like that, even though I got there, even though I knew some of those years we weren't as good, I was like that. But I've kind of become more rational with it. You know what I'm saying? But we won the national championship. To me, it's a throwaway year. Bryce Underwood's coming, so just be prepared, man.
It's like if Michigan wins this game, I know that I'm going to come on here, and I can already
it's gonna be brutal.
what it's going to be like, because I'll be fine. My self-worth and my emotional status and mental state is not connected to a bunch of 18-year-old kids, so I'm going to be just fine. No, I will be disappointed that Ohio State lost, but for another thing, they're going to still probably be in the playoffs. So
that's guaranteed at this point.
Things have just changed so dramatically that unfortunately this game's not as important as it used to be.
It might be better if they lose. Because if you look at the way seeding is, right, they would play theoretically ASU and Boise State, but it's Michigan, so obviously they don't want to lose. But I'm just saying, in terms of a national championship, it actually might be better. I think it'd be at this point. It'd be almost pathetic if Ohio State doesn't win the Natty. I think this is the best opportunity that they've had going all the way back to 2015.
Yeah, well, see, again, I don't view it the same way because every season Ohio State, I believe, can win a national championship. I don't know when the last time I thought that they didn't have a chance to win a national championship. I guess other than the Luke Fickell year, that would have been like 2004, 2000, not
Yeah,
even
but you could say, yeah, but you could believe they have a chance every year, but to a different degree, right? Like you
yeah,
could say,
sure,
like, oh,
of course.
I think this year this is the highest degree they've had, in my opinion, just because of the playing field and where they're at going back years.
Do you want a crazy stat? Here's a crazy stat for you. We'll take out the Luke Fickell year. We'll just go with the head coaches, Tressel, Meyer, Ryan Day. The last time Ohio State would have missed a 12-team playoff was 2004.
Dang. Oh, and I'm gonna go, but it's my last thing. It's kind of a shot at Darrell. Hey, Darrell, if this was a regular playoff, the SEC probably the SEC ain't even in there, my guy. All right.
Yeah.
All right, you have a good night, man. We'll see what happens after the game. We'll see if it's the worst loss in Ohio State history or if it's back to quote unquote regular programming for you. All right, man.
Thanks, man. Worst loss in Ohio State history. No, it will not be the worst loss in Ohio State history because that's not possible. They'll be 10-2 if they lose, and they'll still be in the playoff, which almost just doesn't seem right. So this is the way college football has been compromised. I love this playoff, and I love talking about the playoff and projecting who's going to be in the playoff. But when you tell me Ohio State and Michigan really doesn't matter, then that's when that tells me the playoff, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the world. Like I was talking to Steve Dace. If you have yet to check out the conversation with Steve Dace, please check out that video that we posted the other day, or we did a live stream the other day with Steve Dace. Also did a recorded with Isaiah Hull of Wolverines Wire. That was great breakdown on Michigan football, not just looking at the game, but looking at the state of Michigan football, the recruiting, the NIL, everything that's being pumped into the Michigan ecosystem that has got Wolverine fans so hyped up about the future. So we talked to Isaiah. We've got all sorts of Michigan, Ohio State coverage all over the place, as we always do, because it is the game and it is the greatest rivalry in sports. So, yeah, there's something that just doesn't quite sit right about that. I long for the days when Ohio State used to be 8-2, 7-3, and they were playing Michigan for a share of the Big Ten championship, and that was the greatest thing in the world. That was the most important thing in the world. 1982, Ohio State 7-3. They could not win the Big Ten championship because the Big Ten really screwed up scheduling that year, and Michigan had one more game played than Ohio State. So actually, Ohio State had one loss. And you talk about, now there's one Big Ten title that needs to be taken off Michigan's record and given to Ohio State. Michigan went 8-1 in the Big Ten, and Ohio State went 7-1. Now you talk about a screwed up system for a while where they played different numbers of games in the Big Ten. And Ohio State beat Michigan. They really won the Big Ten championship. But anyway, where Ohio State beat Michigan, they're 8-3. They're headed to the Holiday Bowl. All is fine with the world. I'm fine. I am perfectly fine. Ohio State beat Michigan. We had an 8-3 regular season. We're going to the Holiday Bowl. That's fine. Yeah, I would rather be 11-0, headed to the Rose Bowl to play for a national championship. But I got to tell you, back then in the 80s, I don't know that I really thought about national championships that much. Maybe I intuitively probably recognized these are kind of stupid. They really don't make much sense, these national championships. They really aren't that valuable. They're not tangible. They're not objective. They're not reasonable. They're not rational. There's about 4 teams that actually should claim each one. And that's one of the things we're doing. We are rewriting the history books here at the Voice of College Football, and we'll pick that up again this offseason. I am not satisfied with the results of the AP and coaches poll voters on national championships because they're ignorant and they made a lot of stupid decisions. And also, even when they made decent decisions, it was out of their control that there were multiple teams, most seasons, multiple teams that have a rightful claim to national championships pre 1998. And then in 1998, there actually are multiple teams that have claims for national championships almost every year. All right. I believe we've got our last call coming in. We got Samuel. Samuel, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, Mark? Can you hear me?
I gotcha. What's the good
Nice.
word?
Nice. Speaking of robbery and stupid national championships,
Okay.
Penn State got robbed in 1994 when
Yes, they
Nebraska
did.
won, and they were undefeated as well. It's like, why you give it to Nebraska? I don't understand that. But
well, Samuel, it's not going to heal your wounds too much, but feel good that here at the Voice of College Football, on our official count of national championships, Penn State has a national championship in 1994.
that's good to hear.
So does Nebraska, but they both have national championships for 1994.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Appreciate you having me on. This is my first call ever.
And they have other ones too, by the way.
Yeah. So two things. So one, as you know, I'm a Penn State fan, Big Ten guy. But one, talking about the Georgia and the Georgia Tech game.
Yeah.
I would say Georgia, in my opinion, got a little lucky because Georgia Tech was out, 3 or 4 DBs starting?
Oh,
DBs?
yeah. They just kept falling. They were in bad shape entering the game, and then they started losing more DBs.
And they lost their leading tackler, the leader of the defense, late in that fourth quarter.
Eifert.
And if you were watching the game, Georgia wasn't able to move the ball until like the third DB and the leading tackler went out. That's when they started throwing it all over the field.
It's a good call.
So, so that they got really lucky on that, and then so I had a take in the beginning of the season, and I want your analysis on it. And nobody's talking about it. Do you think, we have the transfer portal, we have, now money, like you said, is being paid to players above the table, but the reason why we're having this wonky season and things are so volatile is because they changed the rule. Instead of having the plays called on the sideline, they put the headpieces in the helmets. So now teams can't cheat as easy, right? So now coaching really matters, and the player and development matters. So if your quarterback can't read the defense, it shows. What do you think about that?
So you're saying, and we're not even talking about and taking shots, I don't think, at the Michigan scandal.
No, I'm not, but
we're talking about legal sign stealing, right? And so that's obviously you don't have to do this. We're not seeing all the crazy signs that, the coaches and the assistants are holding on the sidelines.
Exactly.
All over the place that can be determined, by the fourth quarter. Okay, every time they did this,
If you notice, a lot of teams are starting slow, right? A lot of teams are starting a lot slower than they usually be because, one, they don't know the other team's plays. It's not as easy, and they actually have to read what's going on. The formations and the calls are being a little more they're being schemed up a lot more. And to me, it shows what teams are actually being coached and the players being developed. Because if you aren't developing your players the right way, and you're just relying on talent, if the players aren't aware of what happened tonight, if the players aren't aware of what they're seeing, and they're reacting slower, which leads to the runs from Georgia Tech, and they're getting schemed up, because they don't have better athletes. So
I think that's a very thoughtful take on your part.
I made that take in the beginning of the season, and I said it's going to be a lot different, and you're going to see teams get exposed because of that. And you're starting to see it. Even when you think about the quarterback for Georgia, he's been playing terrible all year. But why is that? They have just as much talent. The recruiting rankings they get, they have transfer portal kind of even things out, but not to the degree, that it should make that big of a difference, because we had the transfer portal years before this, and Georgia still was dominant, right? So what changed?
No, I think that's an interesting observation. I'm not going to say that that's ironclad exactly what's going on, but it's a great theory and makes total sense.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that take to your channel, because
that's great.
No one in the national, it's as if that didn't happen and nobody's talking about it at all. Nobody referenced it. Nobody is talking about the change in the headsets. Crowd noise actually matters a lot more, because if you can't hear the call, a lot of that matters. So I don't know. That's my take. And then, Big Ten, SEC is kind of getting. This is my thing with the SEC chatter, and I try to be as unbiased. I watch college football, right? I'm a Penn State guy, but I watch college football. SEC has more talent, but you can't, especially for Penn State, you can't knock Penn State for playing Minnesota tight and just say that, the SEC top to bottom is just better, because weather matters as well, right? How cold, weather, turf, I don't know. So I think it's, if SEC teams had to go up to Minnesota and play, how would they fare? Not everybody's Alabama, so Minnesota might be able to sneak a couple teams, in my opinion, or Wisconsin or Iowa.
Sure, they could.
So and styles makes fights. So I don't know.
There have been many years that Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin have played bowl games against SEC teams and were given little chance to win, and they have won.
But to me, the bowl games are inherently unfair, because usually the Big Ten teams are traveling much further.
Sure.
They're all going to the South. No one's coming up north, where it's a different. The weather matters. Happy Valley, the elevation matters. This is different. That's like Utah. They make a big deal about playing in Utah. That matters. So, in my opinion. So I know it's getting late, but been waiting to call in and give my take. So, and get your analysis on it.
Let me tell you this quick, Samuel. So this is the first time you called. So I apologize, because I wanted to take yours or anybody else's calls first, but I didn't see you down here. So there are rows to these calls. So it drops below a level and I can't see it. But anyway, so the next time you call, I will look for your name there and put you on in ahead of the other calls. So I appreciate you calling.
Thanks. And what's going on with Darrell, man? What the SEC?
He loves the SEC. He loves the SEC, and he just thinks the SEC is the best, and he believes that the best team should be in the playoffs, regardless of what their records are. If they played the tough schedules, and he defends the SEC, and he brings some great takes. Now he tends to be way off on one end of the spectrum, and I kind of bring him back toward the middle or do my best, because I get it. I do think that the SEC is still the best conference, but I think it's the best conference top to bottom.
Right.
I tend to think that the way things stand right now, and we obviously get different data points every week and change our minds slightly every week, that I think Ohio State and Oregon are the two best teams in the country right now. And we saw how well Penn State played Ohio State about 4 or 5 weeks ago. So Penn State's certainly in that group of teams with Georgia, Tennessee, Notre Dame. And that when I say Oregon and Ohio State are better than everyone else, that doesn't mean that there's some kind of big gap. I don't believe that at all. They could lose to anyone as well.
Yeah.
I just think they've been more consistently good.
Yeah. And I can see that. And I can see that. And I was going to say, another hot take, maybe, to me, with the addition of the West Coast teams, and this is just my opinion, I know I'm gonna get roasted in the chat, but to me, when we added the West Coast teams, to me, the Big Ten now has the toughest conference only because of the travel, right? The East, like USC going to Maryland, Penn State going out to USC. If you look at those home records, a lot of teams don't really beat the West Coast teams when they go home. UCLA beat Iowa, and they're one of the bottom feeders. So it's just, I think because of the travel, it makes it a lot more difficult to go on the road in the Big Ten now, where SEC is still tough. Like the talent is still tough, but it's not as tough as a travel. You know, the distance is not as far. I guess what's the furthest team? Texas and Florida?
Yeah, I guess technically Texas and South Carolina or Missouri and South Carolina would be the furthest points.
Yeah.
Separating. There's not, certainly we saw Rutgers have to go to USC, and UCLA went to Penn State, and USC went to Maryland, all the way across the country.
Now this year is the first year, and a lot of those teams are down. But as those teams, as everything starts to level out, I think you're going to see that going on the road in the Big Ten is not going to be a give me. It doesn't matter who it is. You know.
Sure.
So that's another take. And I think with the 12-team playoff, to me the beauty of it is it takes the hypothetical, right? Like this team, the SEC, Big Ten, even a group of 5. It gives people a seat at the table, and now they get to play each other, and we will see. You know who is really the best. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'll let you go.
Right, man.
Mark.
Yeah, thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
All right.
All right, we got Michael still hanging on here. We'll give Michael one more shot. Michael, you still around?
Hey, Mark, sorry about that. I have myself muted.
All right.
Sorry, but hey, I got a question. Someone brought it up earlier. Rivalries don't really matter. How many times have you seen it before? And I'll take for IU and Purdue, for example. There's been times in the 80s and stuff like that where if IU beats Purdue to win the bucket, they go to the bowl game. And Purdue actually won the game and spoiled their season where they didn't get to the bowl game. How many times has that been like with Michigan and Ohio State?
When a team lost the game and didn't make a bowl game?
Bowl game or won the Big Ten championship. Say like Michigan was ahead by a game, right?
Yes.
Last game of the season, Ohio State wins, they force a tie, co-conference champions. You see where I'm going with it?
I guess I could go through every year and tell you what the scenario was.
No, I'm saying when's the last time they said rivalry games don't mean nothing? They do.
Who's they?
It was somewhere when you brought it up in the stream earlier.
Okay. I don't recall that.
Talking about when a team was 10-2 and the other team was 10-2. That's what I was referring to. You had it up on the screen earlier.
Okay.
I can't remember who said it, but I was going to say how many times has that been before to where, or Ohio State spoiled Michigan's season or vice versa before.
How many times have they spoiled each other's seasons?
Yeah.
2023, 2022, 2021.
No, I mean, not
Ohio State did not make the playoffs because they were 11-0 last year and they lost to Michigan by a touchdown.
Okay.
That ruined their season.
I'm talking about pre college football playoff.
Oh, pre-college football playoff. Okay.
In my lifetime, in our lifetime, of course.
Okay. 2013, no. 2012, no. 2011. You're talking about having a team not go to a bowl game or win a championship because of the game.
Yeah.
Okay. 2012, no. 2011, no. 2010, no. 2009, no. 2008, no. 2007, no. Well, there was a year in there where Ohio State beat Michigan, who is 5-6. So 2014, Ohio State beat a 5-6 Michigan team. So obviously they didn't go to a bowl game.
Yeah.
2008, Ohio State beat Michigan and they were 5-6. So that sent them to 5-7. They didn't make a bowl game. 2006, they were 1-2 in the country. So Ohio State won the game and denied Michigan from playing in the BCS championship game. 2005, 2004, 2004, Michigan won the Big Ten championship, but Ohio State sent them to the Rose Bowl with a loss.
Okay.
I could name you a bunch of different times when the winner won the Big Ten championship game, or went on to win the Big Ten championship. So I don't know exactly what you're getting at, but anyway, I could go through every year and tell you the consequences of
Getting
the
back
game.
to the 2006 game, was that the greatest game of all time in college football history?
Oh, no, it was one of them. I'm not one that makes declarations like one game is the greatest game of all time. I don't believe in that.
Troy Smith, he just straight balled that day.
Sure, he did.
I think he had like what 5 touchdown passes.
Troy Smith balled out 3 consecutive years against Michigan.
Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to think who the quarterback was back in those. Was it Henney?
Yes, Chad Henne.
All right. Now, another thing I'm trying to question too. Everybody thinks it'll be right. Same thing I'm going to say about the Purdue IU game, which is the first time I've ever played the Bucky game. And I think points are going to be at a premium tomorrow. Because I think it'll be more of a defensive game.
Yeah.
Because of the weather. So I'm thinking maybe like a 20-13 or 24-17 game tomorrow.
You're talking about the old Oaken Bucket game.
No, I'm talking about
Ohio State, Michigan. Yeah.
And I think it might be a little bit low scoring game, maybe like a 17-13. I mean, I could be wrong for the IU game. IU could put 70 up tomorrow. But I'm just saying because of the weather conditions tomorrow, I don't think points will be at a premium tomorrow.
Yes. You mean points will be at a premium?
Yeah. I think in the Michigan Ohio State game, I think the defense is going to step up. I could be wrong because I think you said it's going to be something like what 31-20. I think is what you said.
I said 27-13.
Okay, so you kind of long stuff like that though, like that. Not bad. So, what game impressed you the most today?
What game impressed me?
Yeah.
Well, this Georgia Tech game had to impress everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fun game to watch. A lot of drama. This is why we watch college football. Very competitive game, crazy game, a lot of very athletic plays, just the strategy, the whole deal.
Yep, not bad. All right. I just want to give my questions about the rivalry, stuff like that. And I know you're gonna be tongue, and I know you're gonna be slammed tomorrow night. So it might be hopefully we can get you the donations to do a couple hour post-game show.
Well, I appreciate it, Michael.
All right. Thanks. Have a great night, Mark. See you,
Have a good night.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
Folks, we got an Ole Miss channel, as you can see right there. And I'm going to put the link in the chat. And I am asking everyone to please subscribe to the channel. So while most of you could care less about Ole Miss, I am asking you as a supporter here at the Voice of College Football to please subscribe to the Ole Miss channel. And then once we get safely over 1,000 subs, that you can go ahead and unsubscribe. But we would appreciate your support. We do a show every Wednesday. So we've got Leanne Herring and Ruby Dreher and myself doing a show every Wednesday, the Ole Miss Live show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And so you're going to notice a trend. We're going to take a different channel every few weeks and just blast it. So Jeffrey, your Indiana channel, Adam, your Rutgers channel, etc. We will just focus on those for a few weeks at a time to do our best to build up those channels. So we're focusing right now on the Ole Miss channel. We did Ole Miss postgame today. And of course, we've got the Ole Miss channel, and then we've got the Ole Miss show. It's every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So please subscribe to the Ole Miss channel. That's the one thing you could do for me on this fine Thanksgiving weekend. Appreciate you being here. We will be live. You know what? Maybe I'll check in at halftime of the Ohio State-Michigan game. I think I've done that in the past. But we will have instant analysis throughout the day, and you'll see me here late night on Saturday with all the big rivalry weekend recaps with all of you to take your calls. Have a great football Saturday.